Welcome to this side of time. Welcome to history, politics, and power. I am Edmond Obilo. The program is State Affairs. Our farm will be green again. Akugo is made for rain. The day she was born, her mother ran mad and wandered away from the land. They say she went back to the gods. The child she left behind was brought up by the innocent old woman living in the hut by the stream. It is Akugo that told me to tell the people to prepare for the journey to Umunmiri, where rain resides. That I should take the message to Umunmiri using a new gong from the gods. I must find the gong in the market before the coming of rain. At this point, a cold breeze swept through the market, and the blind boy asked me to close my eyes to see his heart. When I opened my eyes, he was not there. But he left for me a gift of a silver gong. It is the gong I am beating on the road to Umunmiri to bring rain. It's rain. It's rain. It's rain. And our farm will be green again. Wake up to time, wake up to history, and wake up to politics and power. In telling the history of events, people, and places, it reminds one of the beauty of the future. I believe in the powers of my dreams, and I believe that the dreams of the night will bet a great future. Though times might be hard in many African countries, but Africa is coming. Nothing will stop it. The African is rising. And the Africa I see, it is not the Africa that want to dominate the rest of the world. It is the Africa that will cooperate with the rest of the world to bring the best to humanity. That is why we are Africans. In talking about Africa, some scholars have argued that we need the African Renaissance. Is it here already? Or the Renaissance has come and gone? Don't forget, the focus of this edition of the program is Kwame Nkrumah. Nkrumah was a Pan-Africanist. He towered above his contemporaries. With an exuberant personality and deep intellectual disposition, Nkrumah led the struggle for the speedy and immediate decolonization of Africa. His speech at Ghana's independence in 1957 explains his vision of Africa. Nkrumah is the subject. What lessons are we going to learn from the events that defined Kwame Nkrumah? What lessons are we to learn from the flaws of Kwame Nkrumah? I will come to the Kwame Nkrumah story. In this class, I'll be happy to read your comments. I'll be happy to read your critiques. And I'll be happy to learn from you. I will also expect you to call in so that we can interact. It's an intellectual class. You know, on state affairs, radio gets deeper. And this is radio in its own form. I am the radio man. And we are broadcasting from State Affairs Studio here in Ibadan. And we are reaching the world. So, I know you are in different parts of the world. Some are in Britain, some are in France. Many are in Nigeria. Many are in Ghana, Kenya, Cote d'Ivoire. Let's come to the class to learn and unlearn, to teach and to be taught. As I approach the discourse on Nkrumah, let me give a background to the state of Africa. And I titled this part of the program, A State of Our Own. I picked the title from a lecture delivered by Professor Egosa Osagai, a renowned professor of comparative politics. He titled the lecture, A State of Our Own. In the lecture, he makes the point that the states in question, Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya, that the state in question has failed to meet the imperatives of national cohesion and development. You know, in Nigeria, we still talk about the Igbo question, the Yoruba question, the Fulani question. Under Buhari, it was the turn of the Fulani. Under Tinubu is the turn of the Yoruba. So how do you define cohesion in such an ethnic state? So in the lecture, Egosa Osagai examined second independence, federalism, and the decolonization of the state in Africa. He used the lecture to present the therapy for the viability of the state in Africa. It was an inaugural lecture he delivered in his capacity as the visiting chair in Commonwealth Studies at the Chancellor Hall, University of London, on the 9th of April, 2014. That was 9 years ago. He says the problems of war, terrorism, corruption, and poverty in Africa are functions of the contested ownership of the state. Who owns the state? In Nigeria, there's this argument that the Fulani feels he owns the Nigerian state. Is the Fulani feeling that way now? That Tinubu A Yoruba man is in charge. In the next 1 year, how will the Yoruba man feel? Will the Yoruba man feel that he owns the Nigerian state? How do you know the owners of the state? In the lecture, Egosa Osagai makes the point. Let me quote him. The state, as it presently exists, is the colonial state that was established to serve interests other than those of the people who were and essentially remain subjects rather than citizens. Are you a subject in Nigeria? All right. Let's take a call. I will pick your call once you call. Hello.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yes, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir.
I can hear you. Make your point.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. All right. We know the challenge. I think they can hear me. But if you call, once you call, make your point. Once you call, make your point. If you can bring it closer to the table, perhaps that would help. Have we flashed the number yet? Okay, perhaps that caller will call again. So I was talking about Egosa Osagai's lecture. And I'm happy to have you in this class of politics, history, and power. In this class, I expect to hear from you. I expect to read your comment. I need your feedback. That's the point I'm making. Tomitokwe Jinodu, Abezo Chaso Bino is in class. Alex Ogwa is in class. All right, I can see Yemisi Shuinka here. Okoro Donchuku Izundu says dreams and ideology are reality that takes time to those that step or cover it ends up wasting their time. For I strongly believe that one day the son of Okonkwo Obi Okeke will become a president of Nigeria. All right. We cover history here. And as we talk history, we make recommendations of text that you can read to improve your knowledge of the subject. All right, let's pick the call. I hope the listener would hear me. Hello.
Hello, good afternoon.
Yes, good afternoon.
Yeah, Radio and this is Mr. Okoro Chukwemeka calling from UK, England.
All right, good to hear your voice, Mr. Chukwemeka.
I'm listening to your program and I want to make a point. Reality and dreams are facts of tomorrow. One day it must come to reality. Dreams must come to reality one day. Like I always tell my Yoruba friends who are jubilating and other Nigerians, one day in Nigeria, it might be in my lifetime. I'm approaching 40 in the next 2 years. It might happen in my own time or in the next generation to come. A son of Okonkwo, Obi, or Okeke will become the president of Nigeria. That is a dream that one day must become reality, no matter how difficult it is to achieve. Example of it, during the colonization of other nations or Africa, Britain never saw it coming to an end. But when the masses or the people decide to end it, no amount of boots like it is in the southeast, the military forces in the southeast can stop the revolution. Take it or you leave it. If the Nigerian system, like Zeke, who started like Zeke of Africa and ended up like Zeke of his community, one day, like Ojukwu will say, we don't need another war, but the war of the brain.
All right. All right.
Nigeria will look for the Igbos, or Igbos will look for Nigeria. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, the clarity of the calls. I want to hear from you as I lead you into the lecture. Remember, the focus is Kwame Nkrumah, but I'm laying a background to the subject, and I'm using a Wusau Sagai's lecture to lay the background. And the title of the lecture is A State of Our Own. The lecture is an interrogation of the features of the state in Africa. He argues that the decolonization process in Africa is incomplete, meaning that the state, an embodiment of colonization, must be liberated to meet the aspirations of indigenous peoples. So the state has not been liberated. Hello.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yes, good afternoon.
I beg, don't be annoyed with me. I beg, just bear with me. This program of Why We Struck, or this one that we listen to, how do I get it? I will need 2 books of it.
All right. You can get the books. We'll put the numbers on the screen.
I mean, Akura in Ondo State.
Yes, we send books to different parts of Nigeria, so we'll send it to you.
Huh?
Send
I
us.
didn't hear you, sir.
Okay, don't worry. Just keep listening. All right.
Okay, cool down.
So if you want to get any of the books we'll bring to the show, send a WhatsApp number to the same studio numbers. Just send a WhatsApp message. Once you send a WhatsApp message, we will tell you the procedure. We send books to different parts of Nigeria, all parts of Nigeria. Hello. Hello.
Hello. Is that Edmondo Bilo?
Yes, Edmondo Bilo.
Yeah. Good afternoon, Redoman.
Yes, good afternoon.
This is Omaba calling from Dagenham SS in the UK. We like your program. We really appreciate you. I just want to chip in a little thing about Africa stuff you are doing, which is a good job anyway. But I was listening to you. You said we should give our honest opinion. Some of us, when we give our honest opinion, even on your pages on Saturdays, whatever, you choose to ignore our message because of choice of our own candidate in the last election. Really, you are doing a good job. But what I want you to do, I want you to balance everything. When you are giving your report, Obi, Tinubu, Atiku. What I see that you more talk about even Tinubu, even for the election, even after the election, it's only Tinubu. For me, I don't have any issue with that, but I just want you to balance it up. So some of us won't feel that maybe you've been biased against Tinubu. I know we got issue in Nigeria. And for me, I supported Ashwaju. I just hope he's going to do good for us. But like you always say, we, the Nigerian citizen, young, we need to stand up, and take this in our own hand, which I believe way to go. But for now, I want you to be really balance up your, whatever you are talking about, a leader. Now you are talking about Nkrumah today. He's a great leader. But we are hoping that we're going to talk about people that are going to have a vision for Olufemi Awolowo, which as of today in Nigeria, I don't think we got any of them. even the people that portray themselves in the 2023 election that they are savior. I just my own submission. I just want you to balance up your report and keep on doing the good. I don't want you to report to be one-sided because some of us feel that you don't like Tinubu, fine. He says everybody have their choice of candidate, but just balance it because Obi is not a saint. Atiku is not a saint. So let's just balance it out. Let us see way forward for Nigeria. So all of us can contribute our own part. Nobody like what's going on in Nigeria today. I don't like it. I have family back home. I know how much I said to them every time. You know what I'm saying? So just let us be positive about our country. So all of us can have a country called a home called Nigeria. Because there's a lot we stay in foreign land. Some of us want to come back home. And they want to come back home for a good country. So please try to balance your report. Let's be a level program. Thank you for your time. We are listening to your program. We are on. We are still listening to you. Thank you for your time, Edmond.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for calling. Yes, let me hear from you. I need the feedback. You are the listener. I am the one talking. Thank you for that feedback. He called from the UK. So I'm talking about the state in Africa. Using Ewosa Osagai's lecture as the benchmark. Ewosa in the lectures is of the view that the crisis of contemporary African states is the struggle between the forces of colonialism and decolonization. He avers that second independence aims at decolonization, something first independence failed to do. So can we say that Rwanda has gotten second independence? Can we say that? The argument Osagai makes is that the 1960 independence of Nigeria is not true independence. That in 1960, we did not really defeat the colonialists. We just moved from post-colonialism to neo-colonialism. So he calls for second independence in most African countries. Because we got independence, yet we were still dependent on the colonialists. We needed them to give us loans to survive. We needed them to build cars for us. We needed to get the weapons from them. And we were still dependent. We are still dependent on them. So the second independence Osagai talks about in the lecture is similar to Kwame Nkrumah's notion of the development of Africa. We will come to that. Ewosa Osagai makes the point that without the resolution of the legitimacy and ownership of the state in Africa, reforming institutions and strengthening of the agency of the state becomes unachievable. Recently, that was last week, at the meeting of our National Council on Police, President Tinubu makes the point that the Nigerian police need reform, that it has never been thoroughly reformed since independence. So what you run somewhat is a colonial police, and the colonial police was created to protect the British leadership, to protect the leaders, the colonialists, not the people. And that is why when you look at the Nigerian police, it is brutal against the people. It protects the leaders, not really the people. And if you look at the African leadership after independence, they steal from Africa the way the colonialists stole from Africa and are still stealing from Africa. So that is what Osagai calls the colonial state. That there's a need for second independence. That means the state will now be for the people. It now becomes a state of our own. The people owns the country. The state is in the interest of the people. It is in the interest, the welfare of the people. In that case, a state for the people will fight against poverty. A state for the people will have standard universities, primary and secondary schools for the development of the human resources of the state. So do you agree with him? He makes a case for federalism as the most suitable political framework for decolonizing the Nigerian state. It is federalism in its varieties to ensure the reinvention of the state for inclusive, equitable, and accountable development. This is the state the people can call their own. Let's listen to Professor Osagai. I interviewed him. I wanted him to explain if the state he is talking about in his lecture is equivalent to that state that is determined by the people, what some call self-determination. So let's listen to the chart with Professor Egusa Osagai.
We talk about, creating states and renegotiating and rebargaining. It's not the most extreme form of, the kinds of, insistences on self-determination in the sense of secession. No, that's not what we're saying. It's for regular communities, organic communities that want to have a state that they can all have a sense of belonging in. And, sense of belonging doesn't mean having federal appointments. It doesn't mean having central government representation. It simply means begin with us. Let us be able to manage what we have. Let us have some portion of the resources that are available to us. I'll give you an example. Here in South Africa, there is the rooibos tea. Rooibos tea is some kind of special tea. It's grown by the Khoisan peoples, and it comes from the rooibos plant, which is only found, in the area. Over the ages, the Khoisan peoples have added value to the Khoisan plant, and they have, a recipe, if you like, some technical ability to make this rooibos tea into a special form of herbal tea. And over the years, the Khoisan people, they are an absolute minority. They've been saying this is our greatest resource. I mean, South Africa as a country gets a lot of benefits, from the commercialization of rooibos tea. But they are saying we who own, the original formula for rooibos, we have been neglected and nothing has come to us. And last year, the government finally said, one, the intellectual property belongs to you, and two, now you are entitled to a percentage of every rooibos tea that is produced. That gives the Khoisan people a space, not in central government, but a space to enjoy the fruits of their labor. That's the kind of ownership that I'm talking about.
So what we have in the Niger Delta at the moment, the question of militancy, is as a result of the contested ownership of the state.
Absolutely, because you see, in negotiating the terms of, accommodation and coexistence, the Niger Delta people ought to have a say. And that say simply means you have a share in what you get. There's 13%, but the question is that kind of derivation, is that the best you can offer to them? Now, we must learn from what the other countries in the world are doing and how they are able to secure some forms of accommodation, some forms of equity and justice. What is happening to the Basque region in Spain, for instance, what is happening to Quebec in Canada, what is happening even to the minorities in China. What do people want? What are they mobilizing for? Is to have a better form of equitable accommodation within the state itself.
State Affairs with Edmondo Bilo is live.
Yes, that's Professor Egusa Osagai. I had that interview with him in 2020 during the COVID-19 pandemic. He was stuck in South Africa then. So, having laid the background to the state in Africa, let us come to Kwame Nkrumah. I will look at Kwame Nkrumah first, using the view of a critique, an intellectual critique. So here, I titled this Nkrumah, the Leninist Tsar. The Leninist Tsar. Who called him a Leninist? Ali Mazrui. Ali Mazrui is one of Africa's intellectual greats. He began his academic career at the University of Makerere, Uganda, serving as a professor of political science and director of the Center for Afro-American and African Studies at the University of Michigan. Mazrui was a visiting scholar at some of the best universities in the world, including Stanford University, the University of Chicago, Oxford, and Harvard. In 2005, Mazrui was selected as the 73rd topmost intellectual in the world. He also made the list of the top 100 public intellectuals by Prospect Magazine of the UK and Foreign Policy Magazine of the United States. Ali Mazrui was influenced by Kwame Nkrumah's ideas of Pan-Africanism, conscientism. So this formed the subject of his discussion on Africa's triple heritage. Mazrui defined triple heritage as 1. Africanity, Islam, and Christianity. That is the triple heritage of Africa. In the article Nkrumah, the Leninist Tsar, published in 1966, Mazrui appreciates Nkrumah's vision of Africa and his ability to inspire Ghanaian nationalism. In the work, he views Nkrumah as a visionary leader who designed appropriate strategies to achieve his goals. However, Mazrui says Nkrumah was carried away by his personality, that Nkrumah's failings came from the tragedy of his domestic excesses. Assessing Nkrumah's rise to power on grounds of his organizational skills and masses orientation, Mazrui blames him for becoming overtly elitist, having used the masses of Ghana to gain power on the platform of the Convention People's Party, CPP. Mazrui frowns at Nkrumah's policy of harassing and persecuting his opponents. J.B. Dankwa, one of the leaders that invited Nkrumah home from London and made him the Secretary General of the United Gold Coast Convention, UGCC, was imprisoned by Nkrumah. Unfortunately, J.B. Dankwa died in detention. One of Nkrumah's flaws that Africans will not forget. Kwame Nkrumah was born in September 1909, the same year Obafemi Awolowo was born. He liked Obafemi Awolowo, and Awolowo liked him. Nkrumah became the Prime Minister of Ghana in 1952. That's about 5 years before Ghana's independence. At independence in 1957, Kwame Nkrumah retained his position as the Prime Minister. He became the President of Ghana after the constitutional amendment of 1960. Like Nigeria, Ghana started as a parliamentary system. Britain colonized Ghana the way it colonized Nigeria, and it started Nigeria as a parliamentary system. After 3 years of self-governance in Ghana, in 1960, there was constitutional reform, and Nkrumah moved from being Prime Minister to being the President of Ghana. He was a socialist. He invested huge resources for the industrial takeoff of Ghana. As a traditional Pan-Africanist, Nkrumah developed a strong national education system for his country. He was overthrown in the military coup of 1966. The coup was sponsored by Western powers who were not comfortable with his rising power, especially in wanting to redefine Africa, changing it from the way the colonialists handed it to indigenous leadership. On his ouster, he lived the rest of his life in Guinea and died in 1972. What is clear is that Nkrumah towered above his contemporaries. With an exuberant personality and deep intellectual disposition, he led the struggle for the speedy and immediate decolonization of Africa. Nkrumah's speech at Ghana's independence in 1957 explains his vision of Africa. We are going to play you that speech. In a moving oration, Nkrumah talked about reshaping the destiny of his country in the brotherhood of Africa, meaning that Ghana's progress was dependent on the progress of the African continent. In the independence speech, Nkrumah promised that Africans will sleep no more. He called it a new Africa, ready to fight its own battle, to prove that when given the chance, the African can create his own personality and identity. Can you see where Egosa Osagai's second independence call comes from? So let's listen to Kwame Nkrumah delivering his speech on Independence Day in Ghana. Kwame Nkrumah, Independence Speech.
No matter how far my eye goes, I can see that you are here in your millions. And my last warning to you is that you all should stand firm behind us so that we can prove to the world that when the African is given a chance, he can show to the world that he's somebody. We are waiting. We shall no more go back to sleep anymore. Today, from now on, there is a new African in the world. That new African is ready to fight his own battle and show that after all, the black man is capable of managing his own affairs. We are going to demonstrate to the world, to the other nations, young as we are, that we are prepared to lay our own foundation. As I said in the assembly just minutes ago, I made it point that we are going to see that we create our own African personality and identity. It's the only way in which we can show the world that we are ready for our own battle. We have done the battle, and we again rededicate ourselves not only in the struggle to emancipate other territories in Africa. Our independence is meaningless unless it is linked up with the total liberation of the African continent.
State Affairs with Edmondo Bilo is live.
Yes. How would you describe that speech? Electrifying. That's the way I would describe it. Electrifying. That was in 1957. I want to know what you think of that speech. The numbers are pinned to this streaming. Get the studio number. I want to know, what do you think about that speech? Delivered in 1957. The power of the mind. He calls it a new Africa, ready to fight its own battle, to prove that when given the chance, the African can create his own personality and identity. Let's play that again. Let's play it again.
No matter how far my eye goes, I can see that you are here in your millions. And my last warning to you is that you all should stand firm behind us so that we can prove to the world that when the African is given a chance, he can show to the world that he's somebody. We are waiting. We shall no more go back to sleep anymore. Today, from now on, there is a new African in the world. That new African is ready to fight his own battle and show that after all, the black man is capable of managing his own affairs. We are going to demonstrate to the world, to the other nations, young as we are, that we are prepared to lay our own foundation. As I said in the assembly just minutes ago, I made it point that we are going to see that we create our own African personality and identity. is the only way in which we can show the world that we are ready for our own battle. We have done the battle, and we again rededicate ourselves not only in the struggle to emancipate other territories in Africa. Our independence is meaningless unless it is linked up with the total liberation of the African continent.
State Affairs with Edmondo Bilo is live.
Wow. What a speech. Incisive, motivating. You know, the independent leaders in most African countries were brilliant. Brilliant. Intellectuals, visionaries. Obafemi Awolowo, Nnamdi Azikiwe, Sekou Toure, Julius Nyerere of Tanzania, Patrice Lumumba of the Congo, Houphouët Boigny of Ivory Coast, now Côte d'Ivoire. Brilliant minds. Dayo Dada, you're saying here that a leader is known by his humility, selflessness, and does what the people want, not what they want. You know, sometimes a great leader don't do what the people want to. He does what the people need. You know, sometimes the people don't even know what they want. So a great leader is the one who shows the people what they really need. You know, he is visionary. He creates the society that will suit them. But there are general basic needs of every society. Food, housing, transportation. That is what the people need. And a great leader also knows that he will do that for the people. So I'm just breaking down your point, Dayo Dada. You said a leader comes for debate, doesn't need vote buying and Dagbero intimidation with INEC and police conspiracy to win elections. You know, those things will continue to happen as long as the state in Africa remains a colonial state. Do not forget that at independence in Nigeria, what led to the first coup in 1966 was election rigging in the Western region. That was a colonial state, and we still run a colonial state where power can be hijacked. And when power is hijacked, it is not used in the interest of the people. It is used in the interest of the hijackers. That is a colonial state. That is why Ehosa Osagai has called for second independence. And he defines it under a broad heading of self-determination, saying self-determination is not necessarily independent. But that state in the interest of the people, that state where the oil in the Niger Delta will lift the Deltan out of poverty. Thank you, Dayo Dada, for leaving your comment here. Amadi Lawson, I can see you. Thank you. Ishola Akim Adetuishi. Thank you, Ishola, for joining the class. Pedro Olayemi Babawale says it's good to be here, but on a lighter note, it's like I'm the only one listening from Nigeria. No, I don't think so. Ishola is listening from Nigeria too. But I can see Omotayo Oluwarotimi Onobamiro is listening. Atlanta Onobamiro is now in the UK. Thank you for joining the broadcast. Kunle Adekbaju, Kunle, you're here? Kunle says, I think going back to history is a good way of reshaping our nation. Yes, Kunle Adepoju is my guy. It is Kunle that worked on the lights in this studio. He did a wonderful job. So if you are building a studio, if you have a church, and you want to design a lighting system, contact Kunle Adepoju. He's a filmmaker. He's good with light. You can see what he did here, the magic of lightning. And Kunle is not that expensive. So I recommend Kunle to you. Karim Sadiq Olayemi. Karim says, learning to improve my knowledge of history, politics, and power. I will comment at the end of the class. Thank you. And you can also share the broadcast. Okay? And invite your friends to join. I'll be recommending 3 or 4 books to you in this class. And what I call the book of the day really is this one. Can you see it? All right, I will put the camera on this book now. You see it? The Pan-African Pantheon. Classical work. It's a big book, lovely book. If you read the compilations here, it will broaden your mind about Africa. The Pan-African Pantheon, prophets, poets, and philosophers. You want to read about the poets, philosophers, political philosophers in Africa. You want to read about Nkrumah, Mandela. I have a book for you. So this book makes a unique contribution to the literature on Pan-Africanism by providing lively biographical essays of 36 major Pan-African figures by a diverse and prominent group of African, Caribbean, and African American scholars. In this book, these scholars examine historical and contemporary Pan-Africanism as an ideology of emancipation and unity. You see the book? Get this book on udarabooks.com. You can also buy it through the WhatsApp numbers pinned to this broadcast. Classical work. Deep. I love the book. It is permanently in my office. Sometimes I just come read about 4 pages. And before you know it, I've finished reading the different copies. The chapters, rather. It's about 650 pages. You see the book? The Pan-African Pantheon. I recommend this book to you. A book of history, politics, and power. Talking about Pan-Africanism, this book covers well-known Pan-Africanists such as W.E.B. Du Bois, Marcus Garvey, Ami Ashwood Garvey. It talks about C.L.R. James, George Padmore, Kwame Nkrumah, Frantz Fanon. Hey, have you read Frantz Fanon? Anyway, we have created this studio to focus more on history. It doesn't mean we're not going to focus on contemporary issues. We are. But the bedrock of the creation is history, learning from the past. In this book, you will learn about Steve Biko. Steve Biko, the South African that was killed during apartheid. You learn about former South African President Thabo Mbeki. In this book, you read about popular figures identified with mainstream Pan-Africanism, such as Maya Angelou, Maria Maba, Buchi Emecheta, Miriam Makeba, Ruth First, Wangari Maathai. You read about Wole Soyinka, Derek Walcott, V.Y. Mudibe. You read about Leopold Senghor, that brilliant philosopher that was the first leader of Senegal. He talked about negritude. You read about him here. In this book, you read about Malcolm X, Bob Marley, and Fela Anikulapo Kuti. If there is a book you should be thinking of buying, is this book, The Pan-African Pantheon. The book also covers topics such as the history and pioneers of Pan-Africanism, the quest for reparations. It talks about politicians of Africa, poets, activists, as well as Pan-Africanism in the social sciences, philosophy, literature, and its musical activists. This is a comprehensive and diverse introductory reader for specialists and general readers alike. I recommend the book to you, The Pan-African Pantheon, Prophets, Poets, and Philosophers, edited by Adekeye Adebajo. Will you get it? Get it on udarabooks.com and get it on the numbers pinned to this broadcast. Just send a WhatsApp message and we can send your book to you anywhere you live in Nigeria. We'll send your books to you. I'm talking about Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana on the show. Remember, our lines are open and you can also call. The numbers pinned to this broadcast. You can call and let's hear from you. As a man of great intelligence, Nkrumah saw the need for South-South cooperation, a platform for regional integration. He set a political agenda for Africa and wanted the black man by all means to chart his own course. He did not only say it, he pursued the idea with the vigor of a fighter on a mission to create a new development frontier driven by Africans. Here, Nkrumah talks about colonialism and tribalism. I want you to listen attentively to this speech that Nkrumah delivered, where he talked about colonialism and tribalism.
We have shaped a destiny for ourselves, and no one can alter the course of that destiny. It is the destiny of complete freedom for Africa, the total liberation of our continent, and its political and economic unification. We have achieved some measure of success in this struggle for human freedom and dignity. But we still have a great task ahead. We can only know the extent of our task and our own strength when we have examined and ascertained that of the enemy. Who is the enemy? Fellow freedom fighters, the enemy is imperialism. Which uses as its weapons colonialism and neocolonialism. Let us be very, very clear about this. Let us also not lose sight of the real objective, which is the liquidation of colonialism and imperialism in all its forms: political, economic, ideological, and the political unification of Africa, our dear continent. Then we must ask, what is imperialism? And what are the forms it has taken? And what other mask is it likely to put on? Modern imperialism arose when capitalism had achieved both industrial and financial monopoly, and the competition for raw materials and markets had made it imperative for the advanced industrialized countries to expand into the less advanced parts of the world. This phenomenon led to the partition of the world among the great powers. Asia and Africa were divided up among them. Fellow freedom fighters and friends, African nationalist thinking has been adjusting to internationalism within the continent, the development process that must lead to the political unification of the African continent. But the objective of African unity can be seriously undermined by tribalism, which provides one of the happiest hunting grounds for the colonialist and new colonialist enemies of African independence and unity. Unless we take this problem of tribalism very carefully in hand, it can undo all our valiant efforts to bring real independence to Africa. We all know the evils of colonialism, but there are some of us who do not appreciate the malevolent possibilities for infinite disruption and even chaos of uncontrolled tribalism, which can make havoc of our hopes and our aspirations. We know that the colonialists are past masters in the policy of divide and rule. They are quick to seize on tribal differences which they discover among us and use this to pit one group against the other. Soon, these superficial differences become exaggerated into serious political factions, which sometimes lead to tragic fratricidal struggles within the same territory. You must guard against it. Guard against it by forging a common united front against the common enemy.
State Affairs with Edmondo Bilo is live.
We are taking you into history, politics, and power. If you listened attentively to that speech, Nkrumah made it clear. That speech was made in the 60s. Look at Africa in 2023. The reason we are reflecting on the past. Are you learning? Are you unlearning? What is Amadi Lawson is saying, the backwardness of Africa is due to the mindset of me, myself and I, of our so-called rulers, resulting to poverty, poor governance. Let your comments come in. You can also call. Dayo Dada says the speech is truly electrifying. These are leaders, not these ones that are looters, taskmasters, low-grade minds, hypocrites, falsehood propagandists, jokers that don't know about leadership. Dayo, calm down. I know. Okay? Ade Idris Aloma says, thank you, Edmund. Insightful program. Thank you, Idris, for listening. That is why we created the studio, so that we'll create more time for intellectual discourse. And you know it's lacking in Africa. The African runs away from deep discourse. But it is deep discourse that recreates a country. Yes, entertainment also makes the people happy. But it's in the deep discourse that we move from ideas to evolution, to innovation. That is why this is a class of history, politics, and power. Going down history lane. You know, we've been talking about the first military coup, the Civil War. We are not done with that subject. It's a constant subject. So that this generation, we understand what happened. You know, I still see sometimes in some writings and comments, the Igbo Yoruba argument, you know. Some call themselves betrayers. No, that's not the perspective I hold. I'm a student of history. I study it keenly. Now, I have nothing against any tribe in Nigeria, but I also understand that leaders have also created that distance among the Nigerian people. The reason we need to study keenly so that we form new opinion to build a new future. We need to rework the state, no doubt. Ben Respect is here. He says, the radio man. Leadership is all about, okay, I've read this before. Okay, he said, radio man. Leadership is all about selflessness. I agree with you. And being disciplined, yes. Ben says majority of our leaders are not disciplined. Not to talk about being selfless and service. The citizens have been taken for granted. Time will tell. Ben, time is already telling. Omotayo Oluwarotimi Onobamiro says, in my opinion, we've not had a genuine African leader since all the independence of the African states. Most of them have been stained by a lot of materialism. But Omotayo, we are also not looking for perfect men, because you might not find them anywhere in the world. Even great leaders have their flaws. They have. There's always that flaw. But their character is mainly dominated by visionary instinct, selflessness. But they still have their flaws. So keep the messages coming as we reflect on Kwame Nkrumah in this class. In that last speech, he talked about colonialism and tribalism. Nkrumah calls for a united state of Africa, suggesting that Nigeria should provide the first head of state of that United States of Africa. Is that what we are trying to do now? You know, the African Union, you know, was formed to take care of the flaws of the Organization of African Unity, OAU. OAU was born out of the struggle of Kwame Nkrumah, but he did not achieve what he wanted. It was not OAU he wanted. He wanted a United States of Africa. You know, yesterday I was listening to the speech of the president of Kenya, William Ruto. You know, he was just rehashing what Nkrumah said in the past. So I can see some realization, especially in East Africa. East Africa is beginning to produce some kind of visionary and revolutionary leaders. They are emerging. I can see them. Yeah, they might not be perfect. And when I see them, because in recent time, in my travels, I've been focusing on East Africa. I listen to their leaders keenly. They have better leaders compared to West African leaders. You know, it tells me that Africa is coming. While Nkrumah's main opponents were colonialists, but he found a strong opposition to his ideas from Nigerian leaders like Tafawa Balewa. If Awolowo had become Nigeria's prime minister at independence, he would have joined Nkrumah to form a United States of Africa. But Britain used the likes of Tafawa Balewa to work against him. That's a story for another time. Nigeria's ruling Northern People's Congress was not interested in Nkrumah's radical approach to the decolonization of Africa. He was a radical. Why the Balewas were gradualists? Let's take it easy. While Ghana and the Casablanca bloc of African countries, buoyed by the Soviet Union's resolution at the United Nations, called for the immediate decolonization of African states, the Nigeria-led Monrovia bloc championed a gradualist approach to African unity and decolonization. The gradualist approach also has its merit. They had their own argument that if we rush it, we might not be able to grow it. So as we learn, we decolonize. There are some merits in that argument. So the disagreement between Kwame Nkrumah's Casablanca bloc and Nigerian-led Monrovia bloc led to the formation of the Organization of African Unity in 1963. So OAU was a compromise between both blocs. Dr. Teslim Elias of Nigeria and his team came up with a document known as the Charter of the Organization of African Unity, OAU. Nkrumah wanted a United States of Africa to defend the continent and chart a development course that transcends the division created by colonial powers. He wanted to bring down the borders, that they were colonial borders, that we don't need the borders. Can you see? Like from January, you don't need a visa to go to Kenya. They want to bring down the border. They say, no, you're an African, you can walk in. Rwanda has announced you don't need a visa to come to Rwanda, because it is limiting integration. It is limiting integration. That was what Nkrumah wanted long ago. That why do you create a Nigerian border? That the borders were created by the colonialists. Some parts of Benin Republic are Yoruba people. Another part of the Yoruba people are in Nigeria. If you go to Ethiopia and Somalia, especially the Ogaden region, you have the Ogaden people of Somalia being part of Ethiopia. That led to the Ogaden War. That was the point Nkrumah was making. Let's listen to this speech that Nkrumah gave on African unity, and let's see what we can learn from it.
Our greatest danger stems from disunity and the inability to see that the realization of our hopes and aspirations, the realization of our objective of total African independence, and of our future progress and prosperity is inextricably bound up with the necessity to unify our policy and actions in connection with the continued struggle for independence and the greater task of economic and social reconstruction beyond it. We must therefore face the issue of African unity now, for only unity will make the artificial boundaries and regional demarcations imposed by colonialism obsolete and superfluous. African unity will thus provide an effective remedy for border disputes and internecine troubles. in a united Africa, there could be no frontier claims between Ethiopia and Somalia, or between Zanzibar and Kenya, Guinea or Liberia, or between Ghana, Togoland, and the Ivory Coast. Because some of the leaders, it must be confessed, do not see the struggle of their brother Africans as part of their own struggle. Even if they did, they would not be free to express their solidarity. These rifts are consciously created by the imperialists between Africans, where they can sit back and watch with sly satisfaction, as well as contempt for those who fail to see how they are being used against Africa's best interests. Regrettably, those states include some who were among the freedom fighters of yesterday and who haven't won their independence, are willing to drop it for some token aid, and thereby deny to those still struggling for freedom even their moral support. Here is a phenomenon against which all African freedom fighters must be on their guard and resist to the utmost. Even though I appreciate the difficulties facing us, I must admit, I find it strange to watch some of us returning willingly to the colonialist fold. This time, they don't even have the excuse of being forced to subject themselves to foreign domination. It makes one wonder, why so much effort and sacrifice and so many lives were given up to the achievement of independence in the first place, if it can only be so quickly and easily surrendered. Unhappily for us, colonialism creates in some intellectual allegiances which are not severed at the moment of independence, but remain to condition loyalties away from Africa toward the metropolis which draws them. They are unable, it would appear, to accept the idea that Africans can get together to make viable and going concern of a combined African continent, but rather see their salvation in coming together in association like the Franco-African community mooted recently at Bangui. Although there are many here who speak English, French, Spanish, or Portuguese, nevertheless, we are all Africans. Africans fighting for Africa's independence, Africa's unity, Africa's future.
State Affairs with Edmondo Bilo is live.
I must say, Nkrumah excites me. I recognize his flaws. At some point he developed the dictatorial tendency as leader of Ghana. But that's what you would also find in many independence leaders in Asia that transformed their country. You need some level of toughness to transform a country. But toughness in the interest of the people, not brutal toughness. Have you read some of Nkrumah's books? I'm trying to get them for the store. They're mostly out of print. Even to find Obafemi Awolowo's books now are so scarce. There is a book I also think you should read. Africa Must Be Modern. Africa Must Be Modern. The Modern Imperative in Contemporary Africa, a Manifesto by Olufemi Taiwo. Hey, this is the book. Africa Must Be Modern. Read this book. You get it on udarabooks.com. And you can also buy it through the WhatsApp numbers you have on this post. Just request for it. We will send it to you anywhere in Nigeria. We deliver books to any parts of Nigeria. Africa must be modern. In this insightful, thought-provoking, controversial, and philosophical book, Femi Taiwo argues and analyzes in a forthright and uncompromising manner what he describes as Africa's hostility towards modernity and how it affects economic development and socio-political transformation. I recommend this beautiful book to you. You see it? Get it. Simple to read. It says, meanwhile, there are no guarantees that what would come of the research would solve any practical problems. Indeed, it may be the case that the scientists would find out that fish don't behave at all. No, it's looking at the science option of developing Africa. A good book to read, Africa Must Be Modern, by Professor Olufemi Taiwo. You'll get it on uderabooks.com. Yes, we'll be rounding off the discourse soon. Before that, one work that has the capacity to inspire. It's a big and heavy book, and it's a bit expensive though, but well printed, color. You can see it's a colored print. Look at it. Look at this book. It's like an encyclopedia. It's entitled Mandela. The book is entitled Mandela. Big book. These are just our new collections. We've not even put it on the store yet. But we'll put it on the store soon. But you can still buy it on the WhatsApp numbers. Big book. Inspiring book. They are tributes to our global icon. This book is edited by Tony Falola. You know, it's about Mandela. Inspiring tributes. You know, motivational tributes. Historical tributes about him. You'll find them in this book. Get a copy through Udara Books WhatsApp number. This is the third book I'm recommending to you. As we round off, it's important to say again and again that Nkrumah wanted the United States of Africa to defend the continent and chart a development course that transcends the division created by colonial powers. Professor Kolawole Ogundowole has written about Nkrumah. Kolawole Ogundowole has gone to Ghana, has studied the speeches of Kwame Nkrumah. Kolawole Ogundowole, a professor of African philosophy at the University of Lagos, now retired, speaks about Kwame Nkrumah. He opens our eyes to Nkrumah. In this book, you give a lot of credit to Kwame Nkrumah. But professors like Mazrui would say Nkrumah was perhaps a czar, a man who was carried away by self-importance. But Ogundowole here celebrates Nkrumah as that philosopher who had the magic wand to transform Africa.
You know, Kwame Nkrumah was an enigma. In fact, I mentioned in this work, Nikolai Copernicus, the Polish scholar, who altered the confusion in the world then when they said the earth was stationary and the sun moving around it. That was the Ptolemy's theorization. And the whole world of religion, Catholicism, embraced that, and no one dare counter that view. But Copernicus, one day, was observing the planetary system with his telescope. Then he observed that no, every other body seems to be standing still, but I'm moving. My telescope is moving. Oh, the earth moves around the sun. He was to be caught and killed. He ran away. But just about 3 years ago, the Roman Catholics themselves, who sought his head at that time when he came out with that new discovery, they had to exhume his body and give him a befitting burial 500 years after. And in fact, I mentioned it at the conference to celebrate Kwame Nkrumah's centenary birth. In fact, that conference in Accra in May 2010 was organized by the entire AU and government of Ghana. I was invited to give a paper there. At that conference, the session where I presented my paper was chaired by the third president of Senegal, Wadae. I mentioned that just like Copernicus, it only took Africa 50 years before they came to recognize the wells, the discovery by Kwame Nkrumah of the need for continental governance. You understand me? So Kwame Nkrumah was a man with many sides. Some pick one side of him, like Mazuri, echoing his imperialist view that Kwame Nkrumah was emperor or anything. Kwame Nkrumah has many sides. Yes, he was a dictator. Nobody denying that. I think he realized that towards the end of his own life. But at the same time, you won't take away from him that was a penetrating philosopher with penetrating mind, far beyond. In fact, he was seeing things about 50, 100 years ahead of his contemporaries.
His book, New Colonialism, The Last Stage of Imperialism, thrilled me.
Oh, well.
He made projections.
Yes.
And he said that the struggle for freedom must begin with intellectualism.
Yes. Yes.
State Affairs with Edmondo Bilo is live.
That is the voice of Professor Kolawole Ogundowole. I went to his house to discuss Kwame Nkrumah. Someday I would bring you the full interview. I had that interview with him about 5 years ago. If you're just joining, welcome to this class of Politics and Power. And we will appreciate if you shared this broadcast so that many would learn from it. The ideological divide in Africa during Nkrumah's time created serious division on the African continent. Nigeria used its size and influence to command the cooperation of majority of African states to tow its gradualist approach, thereby stopping Nkrumah as the biggest factor on the continent. African leaders at independence were brilliant, articulate. Many of them knew the road to African enlightenment and displayed this in their persuasive and visionary speeches. They were mostly intellectuals at their best. Talk of Julius Nyerere, Obafemi Awolowo, Leopold Senghor, and others. They were great minds. At this point, we call it a day on the program State Affairs. I am Edmondo Bilo. Join us on Wednesday for another edition of the program. Thank you for listening, and thank you for being there.
It doesn't matter how far my eye goes, I can see that you are here in your millions. And my last warning to you is that you ought to stand firm behind us so that we can prove to the world that when the African is given a chance, he can show to the world that he's somebody. We are but waiting. We shall no more go back to sleep anymore. Today, from now on, there is a new African in the world. That new African is ready to fight his own battle and show that, after all, the black man is capable of managing his own affairs. We are going to demonstrate to the world, to the other nations, young as we are, that we are prepared to lay our own foundation. As I said in the assembly just minutes ago, I made it point that we are going to see that we create our own African personality and identity. It's the only way in which we can show the world that we are ready for our own battle. We have done the battle, and we again rededicate ourselves not only in the struggle to emancipate other territories in Africa. Our independence is meaningless unless it is linked up with the total liberation of the African continent.
State Affairs with Edmondo Bilo.